Hi guys, Martin here with a quick look at MXGP on the PlayStation Vita. By now you'll have probably seen Alan's MXGP sessions on the PC, but I popped along to PQ, who published the game, for a quick look at the Vita version. Just having a trawl here through some of the menus, which as you can see match the console game, as we see some lovely live action footage of the Latvian circuit. Very nice authentic presentation that appeals to fans of the sport. It's good to see they've retained that on the handheld version. I should apologise for the low lighting actually. I didn't have a lot of time to record this, and the video came out a little bit darker than I would have liked. It's always tricky trying to film these Vita videos and keep the console steady at a good angle. You may also see it go out of focus occasionally, but nevertheless it still gives you a good idea of how it compares on the Vita. This was one of my first goes on the Vita version, so you'll see me bump into the opposition a lot as I fumble my way through, and lots of failed attempts at scrubbing as well, as I acquaint myself with the controls. It is a bit tricky at first to get used to the dual stick independent bike and rider controls on the Vita, simply because the analog sticks are that much smaller, but you do get used to it after a while, and soon it becomes just as intuitive as the console games. And of course you can also adjust the physics to add more challenge. So we've seen Milestone's WRC and MotoGP ports on the Vita before, which were very faithful representations of their console counterparts. I mean, they look virtually identical graphically, which was hugely impressive for a handheld. It's always amazing to see what the developers can achieve on the Vita. So it's a shame really to see that Milestone are pretty much the only developer still making Vita racing games now. Need for Speed Most Wanted, for example, was absolutely brilliant, I thought, but it just didn't sell. So EA obviously didn't think it was worth releasing any future titles on the platform. And it was the same story for the Wii U. What's different about MXGP on the Vita though is that it isn't just a port, unlike WRC and MotoGP. It was built separately from the console versions from the ground up, specifically for the Vita, just like Criterion did for Need for Speed Most Wanted, to give it some performance advantages, although there are still some long loading times. It's great to see Milestone still support the Vita. We've seen their games get better as they learned how to better utilise the hardware over time. You may remember WRC 3, for example, only shipped with about half the content included in the console game initially, but that isn't the case anymore in their games since then. Having said that, there are a few key compromises in MXGP. First off, being on the Vita, there is some loss in detail compared to the console game. You can see the lighting effects have been toned down quite a bit, which causes the game to lose some of its shine and dilute the colour palette a bit. You'll also have probably noticed how flat the track surface is by comparison, and the reason for that is because there's no dynamic terrain deformation, which was really impressive to see on the aging PS3. So it's a shame not to see it implemented on the Vita, as this was one of the standout features on the console version. It does make MXGP a little bit less challenging to play on the Vita. Motocross is a very physical sport, as the riders carve their way through and negotiate all the ruts in the track, and that feeling is lost on the Vita version of MXGP. I mean, this does make the Vita version easier to play though, as you're less liable to fall off your bike, which may be an advantage to some. Nevertheless, all that aside, it does still hold up pretty well on the Vita, and is certainly an improvement from what we saw in Mud, particularly in the physics. There's some nice particle effects as the bikes kick up dirt, and I like how the riders' racing overalls gather mud and rustle about in the wind, just like in the console game. So, on to the second race in Belgium. You should see my performance improve a bit as I finally get the hang of scrubbing. Although having said that, I did just barge into the opposition there and cause a bit of a pile-up. Whoops. So the other big difference with MXGP on the Vita is that the number of opponents has been reduced from 16 to 10, which again makes the Vita version much less challenging and intense. I also found the AI didn't put up much of a fight, no matter what difficulty you select. You'll see I get quite far ahead in the race, which isn't really much fun on your own. It doesn't help when the races already feel a bit sparse, with the reduced number of rivals to race against. But still, apart from these compromises, the core game is still intact. It has all the same content and the same advanced physics system, which translate very well onto a handheld. And most importantly, it's still fun to play in short bursts, ideal for the Vita. Milestone are really holding their own at the moment in terms of racing games on the Vita. As a Vita owner myself, there really aren't many racing games to choose from at the moment. There aren't really any high-profile releases on the horizon either, with the exception, of course, of MotoGP 14, which we will also hopefully take a look at on the Vita soon. Other racing games on the Vita, well, we also had Cell Damage HD, and there's some upcoming ports of Toy Box Racing and Jet Car Stunts, which were pit mobile games, but you can't really compare them to MXGP as they're not exactly serious racing games compared to Milestone's releases. So making my way up the pack there, I slowly start to get a better feel for the bike. It's all about balancing the momentum and getting the rider's weight, shifting the rider's weight around corners and timing the jumps correctly. This is probably the longest time I've actually managed to stay on the bike without falling off. As you can see, the frame rate is pretty solid, just as in the PS3 version. It's good to see they've managed to get the most out of the Vita performance-wise. Which is probably down to some of the reduced detail, of course. You can see as well, for example, there's no dust trail effects either, I just noticed. That would have quite a big effect on the performance if it was in there. Likewise, you can see the trackside details not quite as intense. Look at those trees, for example. I think there's less crowds as well. Like I said before, at this point of the race, it's quite easy to stay ahead of the pack. They're not really posing much challenge to me. Oh, total wipeout there. On that note, that's it for this look at MXGP, but we'll hopefully have some more Vita content coming soon.